Thank you so much for coming in today. Today is going to be sprinkled with little bits of information that are going to be helpful, little bits of science, some Easter eggs in there for those of you who are looking for them, because I'm going to try to keep it interesting and meaningful, and hopefully you walk away today with a little bit of insight about yourself and how emotions work and how the body works and how the amygdala works. Oh yeah, we're going there. So first I want to start by opening with a story. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of the story of Rahab in the Bible. She was a prostitute, Canaanite. Absolutely. So in the book of Joshua, Rahab is a prostitute. I'm not a prostitute, just like putting that out there. But the story is important because it's about pride. And so Rahab shelters Joshua and Caleb as they scout the city before the Battle of Jericho. Does everybody remember what happens during the Battle of Jericho? They fought, the city comes crashing down, and Rahab believed that God would spare her, and he did. And for her to be found, what she did was she placed her cable, her robe, that tied her robe shut, and as a prostitute, she would have worn the color red. And she draped that over the broken down rubble of the walls, and so her symbol of her shame became the very thing that saved her. So I'm starting there, and I'm already getting emotional, because going into this, I think it's important that you know who I am and my background so that you trust me and know that I know what I'm talking about and that I've been where you are. I have so many notes here, I don't even know if I'll stick to any of them. We'll see how it goes. So the first thing that I want to talk about is that I'm from Los Angeles, so I'll just go to this slide here. So I'm originally from Los Angeles, and I moved to Texas with my husband when I was 24. We live in Houston now and have for about 18 years. But I was homeschooled the last couple of years in high school due to bullying and things like that. I wasn't interested in going to high school. I just so happened to live up the road from a community college that had like a $10 million recording art studio, an amazing music program. And because I graduated a little bit early from high school, I started at that community college as a psychology major and for a semester. And then I found music. I was already very active in music and on the praise and worship team at my church with my mom's favorite little brother and my favorite uncle, Mike. He had the rocker hair and all of that fun stuff. And so this is Uncle Mike. This is actually John Bon Jovi. This is not Uncle Mike. I don't have a picture of Uncle Mike. So if you don't know who Bon Jovi is, Google him, because that ain't Uncle Mike. So I'm going to go back one. So in this college program, I joined the choir. I didn't know what I was doing. I'd only really sung at my church. I auditioned with 200 other people, and 20 people made it, and I was one of them. I knew how to play the piano a little bit. I knew how to read music a little bit. But it was there that I really found my home. And I took my very first voice lesson on that campus with a woman named Kelly, who is only 25 years old herself. And Kelly was awesome. Kelly was so cool. I wanted to be like Kelly. And so I changed my major to opera performance, just like Kelly. I changed my favorite color to red, just like Kelly. I wrapped up my identity in who she was, and she befriended me and kind of took me under her wing like a little sister and loved me and helped me grow and was like, hey, you got these money notes, amazing, let's go for it. So I traveled around Europe with this show choir that I had joined, traveled and performed on cruise ships, and did that for about 3 years. Took classes in theater and dance and music, so much so that I had 110 transferable units by the time I left this community college. It's a lot of units, and so, but they weren't quite in these things that I needed to get a degree, so I decided, time to transfer. I transferred to a very small, we're at Uncle Mike again. I transferred to a very small university with about 2,000 students. I was one of 6 voice majors. They threw money at me. It was fantastic. And by the time I left, 3 years later, there was 46 voice majors. And I transferred to Cal State University at Los Angeles. I still hadn't had my undergraduate degree yet. So you see, I transferred, and then I transferred again, and then I transferred again. And so it became kind of a theme where I felt like I don't know how to finish things. I know how to start things. I'm super good at starting things, but I'm not quite sure how to finish them. And so I would meet somebody or get distracted or get mad and burn a bridge and a relationship, and I would transfer, and I would move across town. And I was very, very stuck in a lot of cycles and patterns that were basically from my childhood. I am a survivor of sexual abuse. I am a child of alcoholic addicts. And somehow I became an opera performance major. And somehow I also healed and continue to heal and will continue to heal. And so the information that I'm bringing to you today is half amassed by the things that I have learned through my own journey in healing, but it's also the symbol of my shame, because I was very ashamed for very, very many years that I hadn't graduated. When I moved to Texas, I was teaching voice at a middle school, and then I started teaching at the high school, college students, adults. I was working quite frequently with adult survivors of sexual trauma while not having totally healed myself. And I just kept becoming interested in this subject of psychology and music, and the more that I immersed myself in music, the more that I found that I healed, and I wasn't quite sure why. And so I have a couple of scans that I'm going to show you later, and I get it now. So moving past Uncle Mike / John Bon Jovi, I am a music and psychology nerd, as I just mentioned. So what I ended up doing after I taught several years of voice lessons was I decided I'm going to go back. I'm going to finish what I started. My kids were old enough, and I thought, well, what am I missing in the studio? You know, by this point, I'd had 16 or so years of training. I had already gone through somatic voice work training in 2015. I met Jeannie LaVetrie, and here was this brilliant woman teaching other teachers and giving this wonderful information to them about how the voice is functional and how it's very tied in with the body. And she was very open about the fact that she never graduated college. And I thought, wow, this is my secret. This is my dirty little secret that I would never tell anybody, because the second any voice teacher found out that I didn't have a degree, I was nothing, or at least I felt like I was nothing. And so that's why I'm telling you this journey about my education, because the symbol of my shame also became the thing that rescued me. It's the thing that drove me to continue to I keep saying the word amass, it's not even in my speech once. I kept gathering all this information about psychology and soaked up everything that I possibly could, because I was trying to figure out my own brain and my own body and my own behaviors and my own ability to connect to other human beings, whether that be through relationships or through performing on stage. And so I jumped way ahead, but that's okay. What I want to tell you is that I went back and filled in the gaps. So what was I missing in my studio? Like I said, I was working with adults of sexual trauma. I needed more psychology. I went full circle, right? That's where I started when I was 17. And so I went back and I finished my degree after having gone to college and transferred. And I had, by that point, 8 years in undergraduate study in music and in opera performance and in vocal arts and in pedagogy. And I could have probably had a master's by that point. Lots of people go to school for 8-9 years, right? They're just doctors and lawyers. So when I went back, I got that psychology undergraduate degree, and I thought, you know what, I'm not done yet. I need more. So I went back, and of course, I'm a mom by this point. I have my studio. My husband has his job. And so I had to go and find a program that would fit what I was doing. So the only one I could find was an online degree in theater. And I was hesitant at first, but it dovetailed really, really nicely with the psychology degree. And I was really impressed by that. If you've ever heard of Uta Hagen, she was an acting teacher and a very, very brilliant one who talked about presence and studying your everyday habits and your everyday life and what you do as part of your education and learning how to be and act on stage, right? When I go and I pick up my my chapstick here and I put it on in the middle of a play, I have to do it in a way while I'm talking that makes sense that I do in everyday life. I shouldn't be walking over and going, and now it is that part in the script where I have the chapstick, and so I will open the chapstick and I will put it on, and then I will put it back on the music stand. Because that's not very authentic, right? I'm not going to really do that in real life. So the other thing that Uta Hagen talked about was an actor's ability to separate emotion from the script or from the demands of the character. And so there's a chapter in one of her books, I wish I could remember it, I'm off the cuff right now, in one of her books where she describes taking the emotion, maybe 95-ish%, because 100% is to get lost and no longer have your memorization for your role, but taking the voice only 90%. So if I'm acting in rage on stage, and I'm screaming and yelling and yada, 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 my first responsibility is to the script. My first responsibility is to get the story told. But if I take my emotion all the way over the brink of my rage, you're not going to be able to understand what I'm saying. It's not going to be clear, articulate. The audience is not going to understand the words that I'm saying either. It's going to be like, blah, 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 right? So that's what she meant about taking the emotion 95, 100%, and keeping the voice safe. I feel like this is really important for music students too, because when we start to become immersed in our emotional storytelling, sometimes the body goes too far and the voice goes too far, and we run ourselves into a position where I'm giving way too much vocally, I've got too much volume, or maybe I don't have great control over the pitch or the flexibility in changing from rhythms and notes. And so I have to be able to define those two things while still being authentic in my storytelling, in my emotion. The thing about it is that currently where we are at in life, I'm up on this stage and you are 20-ish feet away from me and all of you are wearing masks, and we are very clearly in the middle of a pandemic, right? So here's the thing. It's okay not to be okay. We are in the middle of this massive culture shift that I believe would have happened anyway. I believe we would have gotten here, all of the fighting and the diversity and the confusion surrounding COVID and how it became political, and workers and wages and housing and education costs and all of these conversations that we're having right now have gotten kind of escalated because at the beginning of COVID, especially when we didn't know as much, I'm going to switch to COVID. There we go. At the beginning of COVID, when we were wiping down our groceries and our packages, we didn't know how dangerous it was or wasn't. We were just kind of all faced with our own mortality and trying to stay safe. And we weren't working, and we weren't going to school, and we weren't doing all the things that distract us and keep us busy. So we were really at the mercy of looking and examining our lives and what we were doing and what we wanted and what we didn't want out of life. And so with that sort of analytical view of what you're doing and what you want out of life, we start to ask ourselves a bunch of questions, right? What's worth it? What's worth my time? What's worth my money? What's worth my physical energy? What's worth my heart? So we heard lots of conversations about people, that had been married for 20, 30 years and ending up getting divorced during quarantine. There was a lot of quarantine babies born too. So we were all kind of in this moment, this cultural shift where everything stopped and we only had ourselves and we only had each other. We also had a mass turning towards the arts. So we were binge watching everything on Netflix. We were listening to all of the music and studying all of the shows. And oh my gosh, have you heard this musical? I'm going to text this over to my friend. Oh my gosh, have you heard this song? This song is gorgeous. And going down that rabbit hole on YouTube where we listen to song after song after song, or we're looking for monologues. And so initially, it became a good thing to be able to pause and go, oh my gosh, I'm going to absorb all this. And we still had this guy who was binge watching every season of Downton Abbey and still telling you that a degree in the arts is pointless and a waste of money and all that. I'm sorry if this is anybody's granddad. I took this photo off of iStock. So yeah, I mean, what are the arts degree? How worth it is it to you in the end? What am I doing? Now all of Broadway, all of music is completely shut down. There's no performance, there's just no anything. Our society glamorizes over functioning. So when we all talk about how busy we are and all the things that are on our schedule and how we have to run over here and how I have to run over there, and I've got this show and this show just opened, and I've got rehearsals for this other thing coming up, and I need to be practicing for my juries, and also I have this big giant issue with my voice. I'm not sure if I have a vocal injury, and I don't know what I'm doing, and so that becomes like we're over-functioning, we're doing too much. It's getting to be overwhelming, it's getting to be stressful, it's getting to be where I'm having to figure out what I can and can't prioritize, and I'm in some kind of a survival mode, right? I'm going to give as much as I can over here and over here and over here, and we're not even really aware of what we're giving or what we're not giving to any situation. I'm kind of giving half of my heart to the different things that I wish I could have a hand in, have a foot in all the way. So with this burnout, society glorifies this busyness, this overfunctioning, this overwork, monetization and hustle, like, is that what the cool kids say? For the younger generation, it's not so quietly, it pressures us and demands us that everything in our lives is to be posted online, too, in a very pretty bow, in a very pretty package, in a very pretty finished package. And then we're asked to monetize it. We're like, oh my gosh, monetize your hobbies. Oh wow, you make little clay things, you knit? Monetize it, put it on Etsy, put it on Marketplace on Facebook. Sell your stuff, so everything becomes, oh, it has to be done, it has to be finished, it has to be perfect, I have to make money off of it now. Then you throw in with an art student, there's this new thing happening for the last few years where they're like, oh, you need as many followers as you can, especially on Instagram and Twitter, because the more followers you have online, the better chance you're going to have of getting a job after, because a company, an arts company, is going to definitely want to hire the guy that's got all the followers, because all the followers means I'm going to have more ticket sales, right? So there's all of this pressure towards perfectionism, and there's no attention paid to the process and what the process looks like and what we pay when we start and choose our piece of music or our monologue before we post it online, or when we start learning how to knit before we post the scarf online for sale. The process has been eliminated. So what does that do for somebody who doesn't understand what the process is supposed to look like and supposed to feel like? Guess what? The process feels like crap. It feels like failure over and over and over again. It feels like hitting a wall. It feels like getting stuck. It feels like overwhelm. It feels like stress. So during COVID, I noticed that my students were not practicing as much. And initially, I thought, okay, well, this thing is happening. But when I started polling my students, I started to realize that there was a pretty common theme among them. Obviously, they were stressed out about the pandemic, but they were more stressed out about the fact that they couldn't perform. And so I started doing a little bit of research, and I realized the act of performing or giving or creating is giving me all of these happy, feel-good emotions. It literally dumps serotonin and adrenaline, all of these great endorphins when I perform, when I connect with other human beings on stage, when I draw a line to connect me and an audience member. When I say, hey, I'm up here and this is the human experience, and somebody in the audience goes, oh my gosh, me too. I thought it was just me. So this is what got interrupted by COVID. So this motivation to practice and do was lost, because to practice and do things means to practice the things we're not good at, doesn't it? None of us came here for the things that we need to work on and get better at. Well, of course we came to the university to work on that, but none of us came into the arts for what we're not good at. what we came into the arts for was the ways that we were getting attention, the ways that we were connecting with other cast members, the ways that we were connecting with the audience member. And with those items taken away emotionally, it became really difficult to find the motivation to keep going in the interim. And so, here, I'm going to quote my girl Brené, because I love Brené Brown. She's a shame researcher. Understanding the difference between healthy striving and perfectionism is critical to laying down the shield and picking up your life. Research shows that perfectionism hampers success. In fact, it is often the path to depression, anxiety, addiction, and life paralysis. So when we're asked to post a perfect picture of, oh, I'm the life of an artist, and I'm drinking my coffee, and I'm studying music, let me take a picture of my coffee next to my sheet music, and we're creating this false image of what it's like to be, first of all, what it's like to be human. Second of all, what it's like to be here doing the hard work. How many of you ever cried in a practice room? Me too. I know there's more hands than that, but that's okay. I'll have your hands up in a little while. So I want to say you are not lazy for not having the motivation to practice during a pandemic. You are probably more likely avoiding difficult emotions. So when we practice, when we get stuck, when we are expressing this part of our voice or working on this part of our voice that's weak, or on a difficult musical passage if you're an instrumentalist, or on a monologue that maybe shows an emotion that you are not very in tune with in your real life. Maybe you've been taught that you're not allowed to get angry. Maybe at home, if you get angry, like, that's an immediate no-no, and I'm going to get sent to my room or whatever. Now we're older, so we can go to our rooms when we want. So when you haven't practiced this emotion and you haven't been allowed to express this emotion, and suddenly you're feeling it a lot in the practice room, you're feeling frustrated, you're feeling angry, you're feeling like a failure, or you're practicing that monologue that's got you feeling a sense of overwhelm, and it's not intentional. It's not method acting. I'm not talking about Stanislavski. We are not purposefully trying to remember difficult things in our life. Like, we're not doing the activating dead memory, memory of dead dog for real tears. That's not what we're doing. The thing is that the body makes the choice for us. When you feel the emotion, when you go into the emotion, in the song, in the monologue, in the musical phrase, right? We've got all this music and all of this theater that talks about all of these different emotions, from love to hate to war to shame to hope, valor. We've even got the 4 seasons. I'm talking about Vivaldi, not the Jersey Boys, but we do like them too. So we've got all of these arts that talk about what emotion is, or what emotion should feel like, but what we don't have is the process and understanding of what emotion actually is in our body. Because it's not a thought. It's not just, oh, I love you. It's a physiological response. So Merriam-Webster's definition is that emotion is a conscious mental reaction, such as anger or fear, subjectively experienced as strong feeling, usually directed toward a specific object, and typically accompanied by, I highlighted it in pink, physiological and behavioral changes in the body. So, what is emotion? What is emotion? Somebody tell me, throw out some emotions. How many emotions can you name? Raise your hand, throw them out. Say them. Somebody? Happiness, good. Anybody else? Despair. Someone? Nervousness, good. Fear. Good. What else? Excitement, absolutely. So, as artists, we are asked to constantly tap into our most vulnerable selves on a daily basis, while somehow continuing to develop a thick skin to handle the weight of rejection. Isn't that mean to do both of those and ask for both of those? I don't know about you, but that's too much for me on any given day. We as artists by nature are more in tune with the world around us. And a quick look at history of music, dance, theater, art is going to tell you what all these emotions are supposed to be, what it is to love and feel heartbreak, what it is to feel despair, what it is to feel nervousness, right? Emotion is the key to everything. It's what makes us human, it's what makes life worth living. It's also what makes life really hard. If we could somehow remove emotion from things, then we could magically omit stress and overwhelm and depression, fear, and everything that makes life hard. But it would also mean that we would be removing joy and gratitude and love, right? All the things that make life amazing. It's that pesky emotional component that makes the act and process of creation and life in general so difficult. So here's why. Oh, I reordered them. That's okay. Oh yeah, you saw find a partner. Be thinking about it. So the end goal is a beautiful moment shared between artist and consumer. But what about the process before the performance? What about getting there? What about getting to the end result? What is that process like? I'm going to catch up. So let's go back to what emotion actually is. It's literally the physiological response in our bodies and brains that change heart rate, breath rate, blood pressure, skin temperature, muscle tone, dilates the pupils, tells the brain to dump dopamine, cortisol, serotonin, glucose changes, adrenaline, etc., and is often also accompanied by thoughts and messages that have been programmed into us from our life experiences, our perceptions, and our upbringing. Emotions can and do happen without accompanying thoughts, especially when there is trauma involved. Trauma has a direct impact on the part of the brain called the amygdala, which is responsible for the physiological reactions to perceived threats, like the increase of heart rate, shallow breathing, shaky knees, sweaty palms associated with stage fright. Right? I was feeling that like 20 minutes ago. This physiological response is literally telling you to run for your life. It's left over from our saber-toothed tiger days, right? Tigers chasing us, run! But it's on stage. There's no tiger chasing me, but my body thinks it's the same thing. My body is still telling me to run away or to fight. My body is still speeding up my heart rate. My body is still making my breath shallow because it needs to pump all this blood and oxygen through my body because I'm about to bolt, right? So what I want you to do right now is pair off with somebody. You're going to find a partner, okay, because we're going to do a little exercise. Hopefully this will make it fun and wake some of you up. So find a friend, and I want you to spread out a little bit because you're going to need a little bit of space because we're going to be talking to each other. You'll need to be able to hear each other. Take a piece of paper with you if you got it. If you don't have a piece of paper, grab your phone, open your notes, or open an email so that you can write notes on your phone. Okay, so grab a partner and spread out. We're only going to take about 3 to 5 minutes to do this. What I want you to do with your partner is you're going to pick a person to speak first. And you're going to take about 2 to 3 minutes, and the speaker is going to tell you a funny or embarrassing story about themselves. Okay? And the listener is going to the best of their ability, without distracting the speaker, take a couple of notes on what you see in their body. What's their facial expression like? How are they moving their body, their hands? How does their breathing change? Does the inflection of their voice change and go up and down when they're telling this story? So you're making the best you can, these little notes, on your perception of what you're hearing, labeling what emotion you think they're feeling. Okay, so take about 2 to 3 minutes to tell your embarrassing story. Go ahead, I'll wait. Did you respond to their emotion and feel it with them? Did you laugh while they were laughing? Yeah, that's empathy. I mean, I hope. I mean, some of it could have been like, oh, that's really cringy, but that's okay. So I want you to switch. Now the other person's going to tell a story, and the person that just told the story is going to listen and analyze and do the same thing. What emotions are we feeling in their body, facial expressions, energy? Are they nervous? Are they, confused about the story? So go ahead and get started. I'll give you about a few more minutes to do that with your partner. Go ahead. So, now that we're all in a good mood, I want a couple of volunteers to come to the microphones that are located in the aisles and tell me what you noticed. Tell me what you noticed about yourself or about the other person, about what we talked about your notes. So I need a brave volunteer to come forth. Please, don't make me sing. Yes, excellent. Go ahead.
So one thing I noticed.
Hold on. Is she on over here? We checked them.
Honestly, I couldn't tell you.
It's okay. Go ahead. I'll repeat it back.
Now it is.
There we go.
It is. So one thing I noticed is a lot of hand motion. One of them was clicking their pen a lot, and both of them sped up when they got nervous.
Great. Awesome. Who else? Yes, please.
I noticed a lot of a lack of eye contact and avoiding eye contact and more of empathy and laughter like you were mentioning as well.
Absolutely. Why an avoidance of eye contact during an embarrassing story? Right? It's funny, it's embarrassing, we're all laughing, we're all having a good time. You know what's underlying the embarrassing story? What embarrasses us? Shame. A little bit of shame. But we can also laugh it off and tell the story as a funny thing that happened to us. Even in the moment we were probably mortified and feeling fear or overwhelm or stress or confusion or whatever it might have been that you were feeling when your embarrassing moment happened. But now you've processed through it You've expressed all of the emotions during that moment, and you have healed. It's such a small glimmer or example of healing, but that's what healing is the ability to be able to tell your story without getting emotionally overwhelmed by it anymore. The emotions have changed, they've shifted, they've become something else. Now I can tell this story. Maybe it's hard to make eye contact a little bit because at the time, your body is still remembering a little bit of what it felt at the moment when it was embarrassed. Okay, so keep that in your head for a little while. All right, so these are the lobes of the brain, and I can't see to read this. That's okay. So we can all see which lobe is responsible for what up there on the screen by reading it. And the most important one, too, in this particular picture, are the frontal lobe, which is responsible for reasoning and planning and decision making. This is the guy we want online, our prefrontal cortex. And then buried deep inside of our temporal lobe, that green one in the middle, is the amygdala. The amygdala is the one that controls fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Fawning is people pleasing. So these are things that happen to us in everyday life. Somebody cuts us off in traffic. We might go into fight or flight because we got afraid, right? That was scary. Our body thinks, oh my gosh, I'm going to die for just a split second. But then you realize it was just some jerk who didn't have his blinker on, and you're fine. And your body processes through the emotion and finishes it out. And then maybe later you tell the story to your mom or whatever about how you almost got in a car accident today. So if you've ever heard the term flip your lid, have you ever heard that term before? When you flip your lid? So inside that temporal lobe is the amygdala. It's part of your limbic system, which controls your heart rate and your blood pressure and your glucose and all of those fun things. And then over that is your prefrontal cortex, that decision-making, that planning thing. So whenever we go into fight or flight, or something stressful or overwhelming happens, or we go into lockdown during a global pandemic and experience a collective trauma together, your brain flips your lid. Your prefrontal cortex goes offline. And your amygdala, your emotional center, takes over. And one of two things happens. Fight or flight, right? Divorces, fighting, freaking out, running out of rooms, slamming doors, that would be fight or flight. Or, on the opposite end of that spectrum is freeze or fawn. I'm sick of arguing with you, I'm going to shut down, I'm done. I'm going to freeze. I feel nothing, I feel numb, I don't care. But underneath that, you do feel something. You just don't feel like you're allowed to express it, or you don't have the energy to go the other direction. So these are called hyper and hypo-arousal. Fight or flight, the screaming, fighting, or running away from conversations and difficult situations. Fight or flight, that's hyper-arousal, that's over-functioning. Doing all the things, too much. That's where panic attacks live. On the other end of the spectrum, in freeze or fawn, fine, I'll do whatever you want, I don't care. Just shut up, stop screaming at me. I'll empty the dishwasher, I'll take out the trash, I'll walk the dog, I'll clean up the poop, whatever it is, right? Freeze or fawn. So that amygdala in the center of your brain is responsible for your fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. And that little guy gets triggered all the stinking time and can go over the top and have higher, more extreme reactions when you've experienced any kind of a trauma. So if you're a child of divorce, that's trauma. If you've been in a major car accident or had major medical issues, that's trauma. We know that childhood abuse or domestic violence, those are major traumas. But you know what else is trauma? Pandemic is trauma. Bullying is trauma. An embarrassing story being told at a lecture you didn't intend to tell that story at, a little bit of trauma. So, what do I do with that? So, yeah, our amygdala is responsible for emotion, memory, motivation, and reward system. I perform, I feel really, really good, I got all this adrenaline, I can't go to sleep when I get home from my performance, I'm wide awake, right? Motivation and reward, I'm motivated to practice for the next show and the next audition. Involuntary bodily functions, not what you think. I'm talking about the reactions, feeling excitement or feeling fear or feeling angry. When there is a perceived threat, like stage fright that we mentioned earlier, it communicates with the limbic system and tells the body to increase the heart rate, release the hormones like adrenaline or cortisol, and this response can be really, really intense. It can be really, really sudden. It can happen when you're unaware of it, right? We probably all know somebody who's experienced panic attacks. I'm one of those people. For years I had them, and I was like, I have no idea why I'm in the middle of Target having a panic attack. Like, they felt like they came on me suddenly. But I was very, very out of tune with my body and with feelings. There's a book by Peter Levine called Healing Trauma, and it's got some body work exercises in it. And one of the exercises is it's really silly, and I thought it was really dumb at the time, and I was really mad that they were making me do it. That my therapist was like, yes, take this exercise and do it. And it's where you slap your hand really, really hard for a couple of minutes, and then after that, you're just going to pay attention to how your skin feels. And I was like, how is this going to help me with panic attacks in the middle of Target? This is stupid. So I did it, and I was like, oh. And then I stopped, and there's like a CD that came with the book, and Peter Levine's voice comes online and goes, now pay attention to what your skin feels like. You may feel tingling or burning where you were smacking, and I didn't feel anything. And I was like, let me do that again. Right? I'm pinching, I'm slapping up my arm and down my arm, and then I'm trying to pay attention to what the sensation felt like in my body. And I felt like I was really paying attention. I felt nothing. So then I go to my husband, and I'm like, I need you to do something kind of weird. I need you to smack your hand. And of course, his name is William, and he's along for the ride. He'll do whatever you ask. He's like, sure, no problem. No questions asked, just smack my hand. No big deal. And so I was like, okay, what do you feel? He's like, what do you mean? I was like, where you were smacking, what did your hand feel like? He's like, I don't know, my hand feels like I was smacking it. Feels tingly, feels hot, kind of hurts. And I was like, that didn't happen for me. So I go to my kids, right? I've got a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old, and I say, okay, I need you to do this thing. And of course, I had to answer a lot more questions with the teenagers. But then they did it, and I have them smack their hand. They're like, Mom, it's weird. And then, okay, what do you feel? They're like, I feel like I've been smacking my hand. It stings, it kind of burns, it kind of tingles. And I was like, I texted my therapist and I said, you might be right, but I'm not happy about it. And she was like, oh, I know I'm right. Yep, totally get it. I was so shut off from my body's physical sensation that I couldn't even feel pain, minor pain. I had also experienced, by this point, a very pretty serious back injury, which we'll get to a little bit later. But because I had kind of shut off my ability to feel and sense things, I was also going in and out of different stages of fight, flight, freeze, fawn. So with this emotion component, right, the average person, this is actually located in, read it recently in Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown, where she talks about, there's like 88 emotions, and she talks about what they all are. The average person can only name about 4 to 5 emotions. They name happiness, fear, anger, maybe love or hate or something like that. But what about when you're feeling enthusiastic or nostalgia, when you're feeling romantic, when you feel inferior to somebody or nervous, when you feel awestruck, shame, overcome? These are all words that we want to start getting familiar with, especially if you're in the arts, especially if you're a singer, especially if you're an actor, especially if you play the violin. You need to know what a piece makes you feel like when you play it, or when you hear it for the first time and think, yes, that's the one I want to play. What does it make you feel? Happy? We can do better than that. Does it make you feel sad, overcome? Does it make you think of something? Does it make you think of your grandfather and sitting on his lap on Sunday mornings, drinking coffee for the first time that's mostly milk and sugar, and he's playing that violin piece. I want to play that, right? What does feeling those emotions do to your body? When I'm feeling fear, I'm feeling afraid of something, where is that located in my body as far as sensation goes, right? I just talked about smacking my hand. I can feel that. That's obvious. Where does fear live? For me, fear lives pretty tightly in my chest and my torso. I feel like a knot in my stomach when I'm afraid. My hands will feel tingly and like my motor control is not very good. My breath gets shallow. My cheeks get hot. When I feel anger, the pit of my stomach gets hot. My hands get tingly. My lower back gets tight. My teeth grit. Right? Maybe I start walking a little differently because I'm done. This child, right? So what we are looking at here is the physiological response in the brain to different emotions. Where they happen in the brain, where the brain lights up on brain scans. Kind of cool. Look how close surprise and fear are. That third one on the top line and that first one on the bottom line are surprise and fear. They're located pretty close to the center. Do you remember where I told you the amygdala is? In the middle, right? So I'm going to show you a bunch of brain scans, and unfortunately I wish they were all lighting up and showing the same kind of thing. So we can't really compare them to each other, but we can compare them to the normal brain scan that they're paired with. So this is where some of these emotions live and happen in the brain. Obviously, this kind of leaves out the physiological response and the rest of the body that might go along with that, but it is what it is. Kind of cool to look at. So this is the brain of an abused Russian orphan. There, what you're seeing on the right, compared to a normal brain on the left. Those two circles are his temporal lobes, the emotional center. They are severely underdeveloped. He was probably placed in a crib when he was very, very young and barely fed and kept alive for a couple of years, no interaction. So his emotional center is completely underdeveloped. This is probably a child, we don't know if it's still a child or if this is an adult that we're looking at, but this is probably a child who lives in a pretty low state of freeze and numb most of the time. Because how do you react? How do you show emotion if you've never been shown an example of it? So I want you to pay attention to that normal brain. We see that front part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. That's our reasoning. That's our planning center. That's our I'm here, I'm now, I'm safe, I'm on stage in this building in the middle of Arkansas. Right? That's pretty lit up. But in that child, there's hardly any red there. There's hardly any sort of planning or reasoning or understanding of where he is or what he's feeling. Look at what's not lit up in the center. That's his amygdala with the fight, flight, freeze, fawn. That is a state of freeze. That is a state of fawn. That's a hypoarousal. There's nothing happening at the center of his brain. However, look at what happens to the brain while listening to music. I think these are really cool. Normal brain at rest, just hanging out on the left there, and then on the right, listening to music. Look what's lit up, especially lit up on the sides, those temporal lobes, that emotion, right? This is imaging you can see on a screen in front of you. We can't necessarily always look at the way fear might increase your heart rate or cause your blood to flow differently or change your blood close. It's hard to take pictures of that. But this we can see. Music is healing. Music therapy is used for victims of PTSD, especially coming back from war in veterans. I have a friend that's a music therapist. She works at the Veterans Hospital. They sing the Beatles, and their brains do that. And their brains reform those connections to emotion. And the amygdala learns how to behave in a more normal way again because of music, right? Because of a finished product of music. And the veteran doesn't know the process the musician took to get there, crying in the practice room, feeling frustrated, feeling like, oh God, why did I think I could major in this? You're here for a reason. Because you're good enough. Because you came here already good enough. So let's talk about the window of tolerance. You're going to see this slide a lot. Okay, in the middle there, when we talked about that healed, that normal regulated amygdala, that normal nervous system doing its job of, oh, I got cut off in traffic, I got really scared, really angry for a second, but then I went back to normal, and I went back to rest and digest. Okay, that's living in the window of tolerance. Things happen and they stress us out, and we go into that hyper-arousal state of fight-flight, above that line. Or we are tired of arguing about the same thing we've been arguing for months and months and months, and we give up and we go into hypo-arousal at the bottom, underneath the window. Or maybe we people please, or whatever. We get depressed, we become ashamed, we lose our motivation, we isolate, we disconnect from each other. The pandemic, trauma, life's normal stresses, your age, your brain's current development, where it's at right now, those are all contributing to a reduced window of tolerance. That's normal, right? We're all a little on edge. I think collectively, in this stage in the pandemic, I think the most of us are kind of in that hypo-arousal. We're kind of numb. We're kind of apathetic. We hear another news story about somebody passing away or whatever, and we're like, well, that's a bummer, right? I'm going to fully admit to that. I definitely feel sorry for people, but at the same time, what can I do about it? So my window is reduced a little bit. Trauma, a collective trauma like a global pandemic and a giant massive shutdown, and having to change our lives and wear masks and remember your mask before you leave the house, and what kind of mask am I going to get, and how many times have I worn this mask? Can I reuse it? Can I wear it again? I don't really have money to buy more masks. Should I wear the cotton mask, or should I wear the N95 mask? Or like all of the things that we now have to think about when we leave the house shrunk our window. So when you are feeling stressed and overwhelmed and crying in that music practice room because you don't think that you're going to be able to master that section of that music, that run you've messed up so many times, your window is reduced such that now whenever you approach that section of that song, you're already approaching it with a reduced window of tolerance. You're already approaching it in a state of hyper or hypo arousal, which means your muscles are going to be feeling things, whether or not you're aware of it. And if you're already in a state of tenseness, right, where does frustration live in your body? Well, it's tight when you're frustrated. And then you're supposed to sing opera? I'm supposed to open my jaw bigger? But I can't get through this. Reduced window of tolerance. So here's the thing. You cannot separate emotional connection from the act of creating or the process. You cannot do what Uta Hagen said necessarily and completely remove your emotion out of your art. If you do, it stops becoming art. It's no longer art, it's something else, right? The arts were designed to evoke emotion from the creator and the consumer alike, creating a rapport between performer and audience through the collective human experience. Without that connection, it stops being art. You're making art in the practice room, frustrated, crying, that's art. It sucks, but it's art. The process is art. The ugly stuff that we don't post online, messing up. Does anybody know who Natalie Weiss is? Yes, she's an amazing belter. She's so incredible singer. I love her. She often posts her process. She posts herself cracking on these high notes. She sometimes posts those funny ones where she's purposefully singing off pitch, which is really hard to do and stay like a half step sharp the entire time. But she also posts when she's trying to land that high note and she cracks, and she posts like 3 or 4 outtakes where it happens over and over and over again. And we don't actually know how many times after that it did happen. But she posts the process. And if you're a young girl trying to sing music like that, to be able to see a high-level professional who's got an instrument like that screwing up, that's important. We need to see that, right? That's authenticity. It's funny, it's interesting. Why is it funny and interesting? Because we know what it feels like. Just like when you were with your partner earlier and you watched their emotions and you kind of started to feel what they were feeling a little bit, we understand when she cracks what that felt like. I had an 11-year-old student a couple years ago, and she was working on Woe Is Me from Spelling Bee, and she got onto a high note and she cracked, and I said, "Did that hurt?" And she said, "Just my pride." I thought that was the funniest thing. I was like, I get it, absolutely, just my pride, right? Thought I was gonna nail it, and I screwed it up. So, I want to go back to mentioning that hand slapping and feeling kind of tuned out and numb, and now I got to find this in my speech thing here. Yeah. So I was one of those people that couldn't name many emotions growing up. Not really something that we talked about in our family. We were always very aware when somebody was angry or laughing. My mom had the loudest laugh. You could hear her down the block. And it was fantastic. So we didn't talk about emotions a whole lot, so I couldn't really name what emotions were, and I always thought, well, emotions are thoughts. I never really understood that emotions could also be physiological, or that we could hold them in our bodies and get stuck in them and stuck in processes that never got the chance to finish. I was one of those people that used to throw up right before every performance I made. I did not throw up today. You can heal. Yeah, so I would I'm singing an opera, I'm playing the lead, and I would vomit on stage profusely, projectile, in the bathroom, giant trash can, and then come out and be like, right? And I just kept going because I was a little bit tuned out, and I didn't have the connection of, oh, I'm getting a little bit nervous, and I vomit. I guess that happens to people sometimes. It happens to people sometimes, but it doesn't necessarily have to forever, right? The symptoms that I was experiencing were unprocessed trauma. The panic attack in Target, the throwing up before performing. My body was preparing to feel what it had felt before. Stage fright for me in my body, without my knowledge, without my permission, made me feel scared and shaky and afraid. I already said scared, afraid. Made me feel all the things that stage fright makes you feel, and that mimicked something that happened to me way back when. But I had no understanding that whether or not I was trying to go there in my brain, my body was reenacting it for me anyway. If I was playing a role where that was going to happen, where I had to be really, really angry, or I had to be really, really sad or something, my body, without my permission, was going to those places physiologically. I'm in the moment, I'm memorized, I'm on script, I'm okay, I can get through it, it's no big deal. But what I had learned to do and what it was doing for me was healing my brain and body, which was also without my knowledge or without my permission. One of the things that they use for people with PTSD to help them is theater, and have them reenact emotions in a really safe way where they weren't allowed to before. So I found art, I found music, I found acting, I found singing, I found something that demanded a physiological response from my body, and then I did it over and over and over and over and over again. And it became safer to experience some of these emotions in my body. I can get mad. I'm not going to kill anybody, maybe, right? I can get excited, I can feel joy, I can feel gratitude, and it's not going to be taken away from me. It could. But for the most part, when I can, if I can, I'm going to live in the moment. I'm going to feel gratitude and I'm going to feel joy for as long as I can. And I'm going to hang on to it until the next time I'm up on stage, or until the next time my kid runs through the front door and wraps her arms around me in ways that I wasn't allowed to do in my own home growing up. As a side effect of holding things and getting things stuck in your body, you can sometimes develop issues with chronic pain. You can also have chronic pain for seemingly no reason whatsoever. In my case, I enjoyed it very much, holding all of my tension in my lower back. I would complain to the doctors in my 30s. I'm like, my lower back is really bothering me. And they'd be like, oh, well, you're in your 30s now, and that's pretty normal, so welcome. Yeah, you're middle-aged. I was like, okay, well, I guess he's the authority. He's the person who knows my body better than I do. So, okay, my back hurts. So it was a couple of years of this happening with a couple of different doctors, and I started to say, hey, when I tie my shoes, I almost throw up because my back hurts. And they were like, okay, you seem fine to me. And I would go home. I'm going to show you this next one. So at 34, in 2014, that's my lower back. That's my L5S1. That little black thing that you see in the middle of the picture, we call it my back baby. That's a disc herniation. It's pressing against that white cord, which is my spinal column. It's 50% occluded. So, for somebody who didn't know much about their body or their emotions or what was and wasn't normal pain, I had that. And I didn't realize how bad it was until I had gotten this MRI, and then the doctor said, hey, do you ever have any problems with like losing your bowels or anything in public? And I was like, that can happen? Oh my gosh. No, that's never happened to me. And he was like, okay, well, you could get rear-ended in a car tomorrow and be paralyzed from the waist down with this kind of an injury. You need surgery now. I had surgery 2 weeks later. They removed the herniation, but because I was not yet 40, they did not give me the surgery that I needed. Thank you, insurance companies. And so I was back 4 years later with the second picture on the right. That's the same location in my spine, even though the pictures are kind of shifted. And now I had stress fractures. That's a little white ring that you see. No more herniation, but that white spinal cord column is a little messed up at the bottom. So this is an injury. The nerves are damaged. So I went back and I had another surgery. This time I was almost 40. So after 4 years of complaining and fighting the insurance company, they finally approved it. And I got a $250,000 surgery covered by my insurance, thank God. Otherwise, I would not be standing in front of you today. And now I have this. Can't get an MRI anymore because when you have metal in your body, they don't want you going to the MRI machine. But that is 2 plates and a polyurethane disc in between. And I have 0 pain. And I've been completely pain-free since literally 12 hours after that surgery. They stood me up to walk, and I was terrified. I was like, oh, I don't want to walk. It's going to hurt so bad. And I got up and I cried. They were like, how's your pain? Are you okay? And I was like, I'm crying because it doesn't hurt. And I haven't felt my back not hurt since I was a child. I just thought that was what people's backs felt like. It hurts all the time. If I do too much, I have to lay down for 3 days. That's normal, right? No, it's not normal. Now, I can do stuff like this. Those are my daughters in the middle. The short one is Megan. The taller one that's taller than me is Emma. My husband, William. This is taken this last Christmas where we went skiing. I skied for 4 days. I fell once. It did not hurt much, just my pride. So this is what paying attention to your body can do. This is what paying attention to the emotions can do. This is what learning what the window of tolerance can reduce can do. When I was living in those years of being in such chronic pain, my window of tolerance was non-existent. Very, very small things would send me over the edge. I was crabby and irritable, as one would expect with that kind of pain going on in your body. But pain doesn't have to be physical. Pain can also be emotional. If I'm playing a show where I have to be physical and emotional, like Diana in Next to Normal in these pictures you see, right? We can look at her and kind of tell what she's feeling in every single one of those. If you don't know what the show Next to Normal is about, it's about a family of 4 trying to deal with the mother's mental illness. It's an incredibly emotionally draining and heavy show. So if I didn't have an awareness of my window of tolerance, and I am afraid of expressing rage, because maybe rage was a no-no emotion in my house, then when I'm asked to play this role over and over and over and express these emotions that I don't feel like I'm allowed to express or feel, whether or not I want to, with or without my permission, my body is going to go into a state of hypo or hyper arousal. I'm not purposefully remembering anything. I'm just telling the story. But my physiological body is telling a different story. So there's 2 outcomes that are going to happen here with this. The first outcome, where's my numbers? It's okay if I reorder them. The first outcome is that I get through the role the best I can. I never really fully tap into emotions like grief or rage or fear or confusion. Maybe I don't ever scrape that deep. That's okay. It's an okay performance. The audience is like, okay, that was an okay performance. We call that schmacting, right? Where we've all seen those performances where we don't necessarily believe the actors we see on stage. We're like, guess they're doing kind of a good job. He's kind of cheesy or overdoes it or underdoes it in what he's doing. That's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is doing that role triggers me to the point where I become suicidal or overwhelmed to the point where I can't get out of bed, or I have panic attacks on the way to these rehearsals where I know I'm going to have to be acting and rehearsing this. That's the worst case scenario. But if I have an understanding, not of schmacting, but of my window of tolerance, I can pay attention to when I need to take a break, when it gets to be too much, when I need to shut down. I get to decide. I get to go, yeah, I'm feeling something kind of upsetting in my body. Let me think about this. Okay, what thoughts are attached to this? Right? Maybe even if you are in the safety of a therapist, what memories are attached to these physical sensations? And we process them. And we go, hey, I can get really angry in this rehearsal now, or I can get really angry in this show now, and it's safe for me to do this. Because I know that it's not going to be like a saber-toothed tiger. It's not going to overwhelm me. It's not going to chase me off the stage. I can handle it. I can control how deep I go in. And when it gets to be too deep, I'm about to start crying and I can't get through my song, a little bit of emotion in the voice of musical theater is preferred. We like it. Too much and you can't get through the song, that's distracting for the audience. My number one job is to myself. But my number 2 job is to tell the story to the best of my ability. Acting is reacting under imaginary circumstances. I'm not a bipolar mother of a dead son and a live teenager like Diana is in Next to Normal. But I can certainly understand and express some of her emotions and show it in an authentic way without triggering myself beyond my capacity, beyond my window. And it's not just acting and musical theater that these things happen in. It's also dance and art. We love Bob Ross. Some of you are way too young to even know who that is. That was a little Easter egg there for the teachers. Or playing music. Super frustrating. That guy's very frustrated. Right? These things all make us feel emotion. Creating and having the arts all make us feel things with or without our permission during the process while presenting the finished product. That brain image that we had a while back while listening to music where it was all lit up, that happens with this stuff too. It happens while performing it, on an instrument, on my feet, on a canvas. I am being vulnerable and presenting something to strangers. I'm saying, accept me. Do you like this? Do you understand this? Have you ever felt this? We have a growing inability to tolerate the uncomfortable physiological sensations that accompany undesired negative emotions. Our window is shrinking, right? Now, there's always that conversation of, oh, there's so much screen time, and it's because you're on your phone. And before phones and smartphones, it was, oh, you're playing too much video games. And before video games, it was, oh, they're on the TV watching TV too much. And before TV, it was, oh, they're at the arcade. I don't know. I wasn't born then. I have no idea. But what those conversations fail to mention, what those conversations about how, oh, additional screen time increases, is associated, that word's important, is associated with an increase in depression, stress, and anxiety, especially among children and adolescents. What that conversation fails to mention is that too much screen time is a symptom. I'm tuning out of something I don't want to feel. I'm playing a million video games so that I don't have to think about things. I'm binge watching 6 seasons of Downton Abbey to avoid feeling things, to avoid processing things. It's a symptom. It is not the cause of depression and anxiety in teenagers. It's just a symptom and a side effect of our inability, I guess it's up there for you, our inability to allow uncomfortable physiological sensations and emotions to live in our body, to come up and out. We stifle them, right? We've got words for this. I heard in a lecture one time by a speech language pathologist, she was talking about how the voice lives halfway between the head and the heart. I like that. We've got terms for it, right? All choked up. So whenever we start to feel like we're going to cry, our throat muscles get really, really tight, and we try to stifle it. Part of that is that those swallow muscles are next to a nerve in your throat that goes to your brain. Guess what part? The amygdala, the emotional center, goes down through your torso, through your body, and it activates your fight or flight response. And it says, if I cry, I will choke to death. I will die. This seems kind of silly to suggest that our bodies and our brains think that we're going to die when we're watching that one part of Finding Nemo. But our bodies don't know that. It's just Finding Nemo. It's okay. I'm not going to die. It's okay to cry. Continued avoidance of these negative emotional states leads to increased need for continued avoidance, more screen time, right? Then you have more fear, more anxiety, decreases motivation to practice music or to create art and do things that you used to love. It's one of the first questions they ask you, isn't it? When they're monitoring your mental health. Are you no longer interested in the things that you used to bring you pleasure? It hijacks your memorization, your concentration, your attention span. Continued avoidance causes disconnection in relationships when conflicts arise and is avoided altogether or overblown into a fight. It can become more difficult over time to develop presence and notice sensations, which can have an impact on coordination and motor skills. If you are a musician and you need a lot of dexterity in your fingers, and you are living in a heightened state of hyper or hypo arousal, similar to the throat tensing up, you're going to lose some of that dexterity in your fingers. You're going to have a little bit of trouble with those runs. You'll probably get through it, especially if you continue to practice it, which retrains the brain, which retrains the body, that you can get through it, and you'll be fine. But if every time you come to that phrase, you go, here comes the hard part, oh my gosh, I don't know if it's going to go okay, right? We're starting to kind of set ourselves up because we're avoiding that feeling. I don't like what it feels like. I don't like what it feels like when I know I'm going to mess something up or when I expect to mess something up. But if I always approach that section of that piece like that, I'm always going to get into that state of hyper arousal. If I've had a couple of good passes, we should always take a few phrases and do them again and again, and you get it right. Fantastic. I always say, great, that was awesome. Let's do it again and make sure it wasn't an accident. Right? Do it again. Do it again. Do it again. 5 times. Oh, messed up. Time 3. That's okay. Do it again. Good, we got it right. Do it 3 more times the right way. Excellent. Now do it the wrong way. It's actually harder after you've gotten something pretty comfortable in your body. You've taught your brain to build those neural pathways. This is how I get from point A to point Z. Now it's hard to do it the wrong way, especially if you're a singer. As a musician, I'll grab a different note, but I don't want to. I don't like how that feels, so I'm probably not going to do it. It steals your time, your money, your physical energy, and your connection to yourself and to others. Okay, great. Now I know that. Where do I start? Build your emotional intelligence, right? Learn more than happy, sad, angry, hate, disgust, whatever. What were there in that movie? What was that movie called? Where they had the little green girl, she was disgust, and the blue sad girl? Inside Out. There were only like 5 or 6 of them, huh? Let's go back to, oops, I went the wrong way. Let's go back to this color wheel. Look at all of the extensions of the surface emotions. All of those have a different physiological sensation in my body and in my brain. They light up different parts of my brain. They cause different physical reactions in heart rates and glucose levels and chemicals to dump in my body. Some of them are probably pretty similar, but they're all different. So many words. Get comfortable with that. Get comfortable with, oh, I'm not just angry, but I'm disappointed. I'm hurt. I'm angry because I got scared. I'm angry because I feel abandoned. Or I'm angry and frustrated because I really want to do this thing, and I feel and expect that I should be able to do this thing, and I can't do this thing. What does disappointment feel like in your body when you don't get that solo, when you don't get that role? Where does it fall on your window of intolerance? Can you manage those, or is it overwhelming? So you want to build your emotional intelligence through mindfulness, through self-awareness, to learn about emotions and how they affect you physiologically. You want to learn where your window of tolerance begins and ends and start to notice and name the emotions as you approach the outer edges into hyper arousal and overwhelm, or into hypo arousal and into shutdown. What do they feel like in my body? What does my body feel like when I'm approaching the edges of I have to shut down, it's too overwhelming? If I don't shut down, I'm going to have a panic attack, I'm going to freak out, I'm going to flip chairs, whatever the case may be. What does your body feel like when you start to blow your lid? Practice calming and self-soothing tactics to retrain your nervous system that controls the fight, flight, freeze, fawn. I hated this answer the first time I heard it. My therapist is like, oh yes, there's so much research now to suggest that practicing yoga and meditation are very healing towards trauma. I'm like, how does sitting in a room breathing for 5 minutes going to take away what constantly overwhelms me or stresses me out every single day? That is ridiculous. Turns out I had to text her again and tell her she was right again after a couple of weeks of doing it. What these have in common, the yoga and the meditation, movement like dance, music, singing, string playing, brass instruments, what these have in common is breath. When you regulate your breathing through a vocal exercise, through a song, through a musical passage, through a phrase, through playing your instrument, right? We've all seen a string quartet where the violinist is using breath to conduct. Yeah. This is regulating my nervous system. This is retraining my window. This is stimulating what's called the vagus nerve, that nerve that I mentioned earlier that runs near your throat, from your amygdala, down through your throat and down through your whole torso. So when you feel stressed, the first thing that you can do when you start to feel overwhelmed is you can go, crap, whatever word you want to use there. Take that deep breath in through your nose. Let's all do this together right now. So you're going to breathe in through your nose. When you breathe out through your mouth and pull your belly muscles in when you do it. It's in a way that you don't necessarily need to breathe, but do it anyway. That is telling that vagus nerve and telling the amygdala, dude, chill, I don't need you. I need my prefrontal cortex to come back online. I need my planning, my reasoning, my critical thinking. I need that. You underneath, amygdala, shh. That's what yoga and meditation, movement, practicing your instrument, even though you don't want to. That's what it does. Limit who you're willing to accept feedback from. This is a good one. So Brene Brown talks about how she walks around with a 1-inch by 1-inch piece of paper in her wallet with the names of people she's willing to accept feedback from. They are her husband, her therapist, her sisters, I think now her adult daughter. That's it. That's it. She does not accept feedback from the trolls that show up at any speech that she does. She does not accept feedback from somebody who didn't like her book. She does not accept feedback from people who do not have her best interest and her well-being at heart. That for you could be your best friend, it could be your mom, it could be your voice teacher, it could be your private music teacher, it could be your dance teacher. People whose opinion you respect and who care about you and care about your well-being, care about your progress. They've shown and proved themselves to be trustworthy. If they are constantly saying things that are making you move outside of your window, maybe that person comes off of your list. Temporarily, maybe that's deserving of a conversation. Hey, what am I doing right? So far you've only told me what I've been doing wrong, and I'm starting to feel a little like I can't do anything right for you. Help me out, right? Difficult conversations. That takes practice too. Find balance between friends, family, school, work, practice, spending time online. Spend time with them in person if you can, right? COVID allowing. There's no substitute for seeing somebody face to face, watching their expressions face to face versus texting or talking to them through Zoom. There's no substitution for being in person with the people who care about you and who you care about. They release all those happy, good feelings and endorphins. Most of the time, sometimes they tick us off, but yeah. So, this is what mindfulness and bodily awareness do. They help calm and retrain the body and brain's responses. All right? Mindfulness, like yoga, meditation, and presence during musical practice, has been scientifically proven to improve the brain's optimal functioning. Studies show that mindfulness rewires the brain and decreases activity in the area of the brain most affected by trauma. MRI scans show that after an 8-week course of mindfulness practice, the brain's fight or flight center, the amygdala, appears to shrink. 8 weeks, not very long. Probably a pretty frequent practice. Could be daily, every other day, what you're willing to tolerate. I wish I had put that window of tolerance in this so many more times. Okay, so without mindfulness, we have a stimulus, we have a trigger, and we have a reaction, and we don't realize what's happening. But with mindfulness, we have the stimulus, the trigger. We can pause and breathe. We can become aware of our physical sensations and how they affect us, how close to our window we're getting. And then I can have a skilled response that is my choice, that is not me hauling off and screaming at everybody in the house when I finally get home for the day. Yeah? Right where you are right now, I want you to put your feet flat on the floor. Sit your back up tall, comfortably. Put your hands on your lap. Relax if that's comfortable. If you're comfortable closing your eyes, you can go ahead and close your eyes. If you would like to leave them open, that's okay too. So I want you to take a deep breath in, and I want you to notice what the air feels like as it enters your nostrils. Right now, you're wearing a mask. It might feel a little warm, but that's okay. You're still getting oxygen. When you breathe out through your mouth, I want you to pay attention to what parts of my body move when I breathe out. When you breathe in again, what parts of my body move when I breathe in? And as you are doing this practice with your breath, I want you to pay attention to your feet touching the floor. What do my feet feel like in my shoes? Can I feel my socks? Can I feel the floor beneath me? Can I feel the pew, the bench under my butt? Can I feel the pew against my back? Where is my head? Is it looking up? Is it looking down? While you're doing this, I want you to think of your favorite holiday or a favorite experience that you had on a holiday. And if you don't have a favorite day or a favorite holiday, I want you to imagine and make one up. What's the perfect day look like for me? For me, as a 42-year-old, very, very mature woman, a perfect day is roller coasters. With my favorite people, my husband, we love roller coasters. Haven't been on one in quite a while. Maybe my body wouldn't like it as much. But that sounds like fun. Okay. Bring your awareness back to the room. And you can open your eyes. So I want you to find your balance. What's too much? What's too little? When am I tuned out, shut down, numb, apathetic? When am I over the top, stressed out, anxious, feeling a sense of urgency, feeling rushed, feeling like I can't get anything right? How do I backtrack that? How do I tell myself that I'm already enough? I was born enough. I'm here for a reason. I got into this program for a reason. I'm gifted and allowed to play music for a reason. I have gifts from God. I have natural gifts from my parents. I've worked hard to hone my gift and work on my craft. You didn't come this far just to come this far. You're in the middle of a process. We all are. There's no such thing as done. There's no such thing as perfectly polished. Perfectionism is a lie. There's no such thing as perfect, and perfect is actually quite boring. We don't go to the theater or to a show to watch a perfect performance. We would buy it on Spotify. Right? We go for the excitement and the way that it makes us feel different in person. It makes us feel physiological emotions in our body. If you take away just one thing from today, I hope it's that you didn't come this far to just come this far. That and the window of tolerance, and the idea that your gifts are also going to be the thing that heal you. Your art, your craft, is going to be the symbol of your healing. That's it. Thank you so much, John Brown University and the Music Theater Department, for having me here to speak to you today. It was an honor. So, do you have questions? What came up for you? What was interesting? Did you learn something new that you didn't know about this process, or through a scan, or through this chat? Do you want to know more? Are you curious about anything? So feel free to ask me anything. Come to the microphone. Love questions. It can literally be like, what's the name of your dog? Love those questions too. Her name's Cody. Lisa's gotten to see pictures of her online. Right? Don't have any questions? Awesome. I hope that means that I was very clear and that you guys are going away feeling hopeful and rejuvenated and energetic and like, yes, best day ever. Okay, I've got this. Emotions are a thing. There's physiological responses to emotions. Okay, sometimes they're great, sometimes they're not. But I know what to do now, I know where to start. If this window of tolerance thing sounds like you, and you find that you are often living outside of this, or if you've experienced some kind of trauma that's bigger than pandemic or midterm week or whatever, I highly recommend getting with a therapist. There are therapists that have specializations just like doctors. There are therapists that specialize in your specific event. And they will create a treatment plan for you. They will help you develop tools to help you cope better, to get you to get you back inside of your window of tolerance. Okay, thank you.